Hey, this segment is brought to you by our good friends at James River Air, James River Air Conditioning. Hey, you know what? James River Air, heating, cooling, plumbing, and electrical, they do it all. They're voted #1 best HVAC contractor by Style Magazine, by the Richmond Times-Dispatch, by Richmond Magazine. Here's the one thing. If you own a home and you're in the Central Virginia area, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's heating, if it's cooling, if it's plumbing, if it's electrical, if it's an appliance, it doesn't matter what it is. James River Air has got your back. 804-358-9333, 804-358-9333. Plumbing issues? No problem. They've got your back on that too. Don't be juggling. Keep all the systems in your home one place and keep them maintained. One call does it all. Everybody bonded. No overtime. You can call them on a weekend. You can call them on Saturday. You can call them on Sunday. Something breaks down. One roof. They're there. It's the best homeowners one-stop shop in America. 804-358-9333. Or you can go to jamesriverair.com. That's jamesriverair.com, and you're good to go. Joining us now, Jason Miyares. Jason, House of Delegates member in Virginia, conservative Republican from Virginia Beach, former prosecutor. Jason Miyares, great to have you with us, sir.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me on, John.
All right, number one, I want to commend your courage for carrying in Virginia essentially President Trump's initiative on taking action on gun legislation. Number one, to close the loophole background checks that make no sense. And the second one, to extend red flag law so we can stop a whack job like we did in Dayton from being able to buy guns, buy high-powered weapons after the postings he did about killing, his kill list, his rape list. You go to Parkland, Florida. The police visited that fella 32 times in his trailer. Something was wrong with him. Nobody was able to take action, and we have these results. Jason, can you outline for us, as the author of the bill, as a Republican in Virginia, what you would like to see done?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think you've touched a lot of that. What we have seen nationwide, and there's kind of two parallel tracks that we're having. On one hand, overall gun violence is approaching a 3-decade low. Most people are shocked to hear that, but because we have things like truth in sentencing, abolition of parole, 3/4 of all crime is done by repeat offenders, so you can get these criminals off our streets that are committing these gun violence, and you keep them incarcerated, gun violence go down. The bad news is mass shootings are way up. Mass shootings are generally defined as where 4 or more victims in any one setting. And so what we have seen consistently with these mass shootings so often, John, is everybody, not on every case, but so many times it's, well, we saw this coming. This person was making verbal threats. He was acting in a mentally deranged manner. It was clear that he was a harm to himself and others. There was a study out of Minnesota that showed about 3/4 of all of these mass shootings are tied to mental health. So my thinking was, it has always been, how do we make sure these people that are mentally deranged, how do we keep them from having access to these weapons that cause so much carnage it's making the front page of the newspaper, it seems like, every other week, and at the same time respect the due process rights that we have guaranteed in the Constitution. So the bill I drafted, I introduced it back in July. It's called the Severe Threat Order of Protection. Essentially what it does is it's a valuable tool for law enforcement to be able to investigate if they've determined this person is a clear threat to themselves and others. They get in front of a judge. A judge determines by a clear and convincing evidence standard that this person is indeed a severe threat to himself and or others. And then he refers it to immediately. They get help. They get within 72 hours a mental health expert and their local community services board. They agree to it. And then after you've had both a judge and a mental health expert, then at that point, a severe threat order of protection that's laid out, they're not able to get access to firearms. And I think it has both due process protections, which I think are important, but at the same time, I think we have to do something to stop this seemingly every other week carnage we're seeing on our streets. And I think that is one of the best tools we can give law enforcement, is to be able to prevent these individuals from getting access to these weapons.
Due process will be involved, and I think, Jason Miyares, you're spot on with this, and this is exactly what President Trump has said. We need to take action to maybe stop some of these in the future. And let me tell you, Jason, there's no argument, there's no infringement of Second Amendment argument that the nutbag in Dayton posting things like a rape list and a kill list should have not been stopped in being able to buy high-powered weapons and 100-drum magazines. There is no way this should have happened. Had your bill been in place and the president's bill been in place, that would have been stopped. You go to Parkland, 32 visits by the cops to this nutbag's house. Somebody would have filed that. Judge would have looked at it and said, no, you can't get a gun. You're crazy. And if you got one, we're going to take it because you're a threat to yourself and other people. There is no argument against this. And the NRA talking points that these people are reading me coming off their screenshot website from 1995 are intellectually assaulting. And now let's get to background checks, right? If you're able to get around a background check, why even have them? I mean, to me, this is another insane argument by the gun lobby about background checks. And I had Nick Freitas on, bless his heart, and he's saying, well, you know, that would restrict me from giving my gun to a nephew. I'm like, knock it off, Nick. There's carve-outs for family. But this is like setting up a liquor store, and on one side of the street, you can't sell liquor to anybody under 21. That's the law. On the other side of the street, it's a free-for-all, and anybody can buy it. I mean, then why even have the law in the first place? Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the bill that I think the president has referenced at the federal level, the Toomey bill from a Republican U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania, is specifically aimed at advertised private sales, that essentially you're acting at that moment as a commercial agent, right? I mean, you are advertising that you're selling your gun for money, and that at the federal level, what that bill will do essentially says that you have to do a background check. So, yes, you're right. Private transfers of family members, but to your point, I mean, the whole reason we have background checks to begin with is right now it is illegal. It has been for some time if you're a convicted felon to own a firearm, but up until we passed the background checks in the 1990s, there's no way for anybody in a gun show, a gun store to know if somebody was walking in their store buying a gun, whether they were a convicted felon. So we instituted the background checks. I think almost everybody recognizes what we've instituted back in the 90s is successful, has largely worked, but you have a large number of loopholes. But the whole idea is convicted felons, as I said earlier, the vast majority of crime is done by repeat offenders. We don't want repeat offenders to have access to guns. We don't want them to be able to go in and be able to easily buy weapons because these are the bad dudes, right? These are not the private law-abiding citizens that have every right to exercise their Second Amendment. These are the bad individuals that are convicted felons, violent felons, looking to prey on the innocent. We want to make sure that we prevent and do the very best we can to prevent them to have the ability of buying weapons. And those are the individuals that are the ones that are doing the vast majority of the gun violence. And then you have this other area, which is my severe threat order protection bill, which is dealing with people that they don't have a prior criminal history, but they are exhibiting clear signs of danger to themselves and others. And just on the last point on that note, 65%, on average, 65% of all gun deaths in America are from suicide. So this is as much about protecting them as well. I mean, we have moved away in our country the last 50, 60 years from involuntary commitments. And so we have people that, whereas used to be they would be involuntary committed and getting help, it's extremely hard to do that. So this is one more step, in my opinion, that we could do to also prevent people from harming themselves. It's not just about some of the mass carnage. It's 60% plus of all gun deaths in America are suicides. So if you have a loved one that is exhibiting clear signs of mental distress that they want to take their own life, and they are making statements that they are a severe threat to themselves, this also enables you to get that gun, out of their hands. So I think that's another important component. I think we have to be smart. I think the American people are demanding us to be smart how we operate here. I think we can both balance our due process rights with protections for the general public. And I think I think we're going to get there. I really do. I think the president's been a leader on this, pushing something that a lot of people are surprised that he is. But I think he is on the right track with particularly with the red flag. I really do. I think he's taking a strong leadership position on this.
Well, in the face of adversity, sometimes you have to take an unpopular stance amongst your base, and that's called leadership. And you don't lead by turning your back. You lead by confronting the issue. We're with Jason Miyares, House of Delegates member, Virginia Beach, Republican, Virginia. He has taken the president's initiatives. He's got a bill in for red flags. He's a Republican. He's gaining Republican backing in the House of Delegates right now. Tim Hugo has signed off on it. He's third in command in the House, the Republican leadership. He's the caucus chairman. You just heard Glenn Davis. He is on. I can promise you many other Republicans in Virginia, both candidates and elected incumbents, are going to come out in favor of Miyares' courageous bill. Now, let's talk honestly here, Jason Miyares. You've been targeted by the gun lobbies, both national NRA and by the VCDL, which is kind of the Virginia big guerrilla gun lobby here. You've been targeted by them. How have you been able to respond to them and go forward with what you believe is the right thing to do for Virginia?
Well, I mean, listen, I am a believer in the Second Amendment. I mean, I am somebody that suffered a number of years ago with a threat made against my family, and so I know the Second Amendment is there so I can have the ability to protect myself and my loved ones. And so I'm a big believer in it. And if you know my family background, my family fled Cuba in the 1960s, where, one of the first things Castro did is make sure that you don't have gun ownership. So I understand why the Second Amendment is an important part of our bulwark of freedom, right? I understand that. I also think it is important, and as somebody who was a prosecutor, I was in the criminal justice system, I saw what worked and what didn't, of taking a very smart, rational approach. And I think you can do that balance. You can absolutely, for example, on the red flag, balance your due process. And the way the Constitution reads, the Fifth Amendment, is no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. By that it means, yes, you can be denied your life. Obviously, we have the death penalty. You can be denied your liberty. We obviously incarcerate you if you commit a crime, or property if you have due process of law. And that's always been the standard. And that's why I think you can have that balancing test. And I think a lot of it's just education. I go out door to door every day. I talk to my constituents every day. And even those that are, Second Amendment supporters, that I talk to them about where I am on this, they understand it. They say, yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. It's the lack of due process. And I want to be clear. There's 14 states that have implemented red flag bills in some capacity or others. And some of those other states that have implemented red flag bills, they don't provide due process at all. And I think that those are the type of bills that legislation I think most of the Second Amendment supporters think of, where literally it could be a private citizen with no due process can file a red flag order and immediately things get strung into action. My bill provides that due process protection. I think a lot of those that believe in the Constitution are looking for, and a lot of this is just education, John. I think that's a big part of it, is just educating people that they know what my bill does and what it doesn't do. But I think just the more information that I'm able to get out to people and supporters, I think overwhelmingly I get a positive response when I explain things, when I explain what my bill does and how it's designed to protect both constitutional liberties and protect the general public.
We're with Jason Miyares, House of Delegates member, Virginia Beach, Republican in Virginia. Jason, taking the bull by the horns and pressing forward legislatively with President Trump's initiative on red flag laws and background checks in Virginia. Jason, let me ask you this. As a Republican, what is your message to suburban women who are right now out at the store before back to school in your suburbs and others around central and northern and southwest Virginia, buying backpacks for their fifth graders with bulletproof vests in them? As a Republican, what is your message to them?
Our number one goal is to keep you and your child safe. I know this personally because all three of my daughters are in Virginia Beach Public Schools, and I'm going back and buying the school supplies too. That is every parent's worst nightmare. How do we make sure we lower gun violence and keep our community safe? Number one, we keep our criminals off our street with truth in sentencing and abolition of parole. That's number one. 3/4 of all the violent crime is done by repeat offenders. Go after the repeat offenders. Number two, let's put together the safeguards in place, and we're working to do that. So those that are showing mental illness, that they're a severe threat to themselves or to others, or we are putting up road barriers so they cannot get access to these firearms. Three, the Republicans in the State House have already implemented an enormous amount of recommendations on school safety. The Speaker of the House, Kurt Cox, and I applaud him for this, implemented the School Safety Commission that put forth dozens of recommendations on school safety that we have put forth, including additional money back in our localities to enhance school safety and security. And four, give our law enforcement individuals the tools and the funding and the support so they can keep our community safe. And I would point out, at least for myself, I've been endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police in every election that I've ever run in. I'm a former Virginia Beach prosecutor. I have prosecuted those that have violated and committed gun violence, and I've unfortunately and tragically, when I was in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, I had to sit in an autopsies of individuals that were the victims of gun violence. So I've seen it firsthand. It's very personal to me, and it's a pledge since the first day I ever ran for office is to try to work to keep our community safe. In Virginia Beach, our crime rates are at 1964 levels. That's because we have a fantastic law enforcement community. We have fantastic prosecutors in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office with Colin Stolley. We've also had laws passed in Virginia that allow us to get these violent criminals off our streets. That would be my message.
Jason Miyares, Republican, Virginia Beach. Jason, before the phones went down and you dropped, what I was asking you is, are you in favor of asking Speaker Kurt Cox to hold a one-day special session, maybe on a weekend, a Saturday or a Sunday with people's schedules, in order to consider your red flag legislation before, after the election, maybe do it in the summer so we can get something done now? What are your thoughts on that?
Listen, I think I would be very favorable to that and support that. We are, I'm going back up on August 20th to testify in front of the Crime Commission. What happened on July 9th, and just to be clear for your listeners, we had 27 bills that were filed about 30 minutes before we got to the floor on July 9th. And I never want Richmond to operate the way Washington, D.C. operates, where Nancy Pelosi famously said we have to pass the bill to find out what's in it. That's never how we've operated in Richmond. There's a reason why we are consistently considered one of the best managed states in the country. And so, yes, the Crime Commission is a bipartisan, independent commission. It has private citizens, people with a law enforcement background, as well as senators, delegates, Republicans, and Democrats. So, yeah, the Crime Commission is meeting on August 20th. I'm having my legislation being considered at that time. I'll get a chance to testify at that time. I would be delighted to see that we could find a way to fit in the schedule. But you got to realize we're a part-time legislature, and you got 140 people that all work outside of the General Assembly. And so we're going to have to be a little bit creative. We're already scheduled to go back in November to vote on what the Crime Commission comes up with. I'd be delighted to see if we could find a way to get back before then to vote for it, because I think it's kind of where the American people and Virginians are. Winston Churchill has that great quote that says, Americans always do the right thing after they've exhausted every other possibility. And I think we are going to get this done. I think Virginia will pass very smart, sensible legislation on the red flag. If you want to call it red flag, my bill is called the STOP Bill, or Severe Threat Order Protection. I think it's a smart due process balanced legislation that protects due process and at the same time gets hands out of the hands of those that are both a threat to themselves and others with mental issues.
Jason, you're spot on, and I'm in favor. I'm going to call for a one-day weekend special session to consider your bills before November, so we're not kicking the can down the road, and we can give the voters of Virginia an opportunity to vote as they see fit, if they think this legislation makes sense or not. but I'm not for stalling this and kicking the can down the road till after the election. That always seemed to me like a weasel move, quite frankly. I think Virginians are asking their legislature to do something. Republicans are in control. Your bill makes sense. Let's get a special session. Let's get one day. Let's see if you can get this passed without 92,000 amendments on it. See if you can do a clean bill. I mean, Democrats are always in favor of a clean bill, right? Remember that? They always want a clean bill. Let's see if we can get a clean one done and see if we can get this passed and see if we can actually take some action for a change. And I commend Jason Miyares what you're doing. And thank you for your leadership on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, John.
All right. Jason Miyares, House of Delegates member, Virginia Beach, Republican, calling for a special session one day, calling for voting on his red flag law bill, which he calls severe court order of protection or stop bill. And I'm exactly with him on it. I think he's spot on. And hopefully we can get this done, and Republicans can take a message to suburbanites in Virginia and say, hey, we are going to do something. We are going to act, and this makes sense. It's common sense legislation.